let's recap what just happened. So we have sewn, and I put masking tape so you know this is the right side of my fabric. No masking tape is here, that's the wrong side. So the right side of my fabric has masking tape. We sewed our bias to the wrong side of our fabric, but it was the right side of the bias. Start at 1/4 of an inch. As we got higher, the bias moved over slightly until we got to the top. Let's rotate around so that you can see that here on the other side as well. Edge to edge down here, 1/4 of an inch distance, so we're right on that crease. And as you go higher and higher and higher, the bias is over slightly. So now we need to cut so that we can rotate this bias and finish our sewing. So we're gonna cut at the very, very top of our stitches, as close as you can to the top. Cut straight up. Try to get close. You don't want a hole, obviously, or you would have to do it again. So take your time, cut straight up, try to get close, not through the stitches. Once you cut, so you're really clipping it, it's just a clip, it's not a true cut, it's a clip. Now we're gonna bring the bias around and edge stitch it down. So once again, that's why I put masking tape to mark the right side of my fabric. We wanna see that edge stitch on the right side of our fabric, and it's only gonna be 1/8 of an inch away. You can even do a 1/16 if you'd like, but at least 1/8 of an inch away. Of course, we are talking about this folded edge here. A 1/16 looks nice, so go for that. But we are talking about the folded edge to cover the stitches. So when you're wondering where are you sewing, the point is to cover this stitch. So we are talking about 1/8 of an inch, or maybe a 1/16 if you're fancy pants. We're talking about 1/8 of an inch from this folded edge, or a 1/16 from this folded edge. Obviously not this edge. If I sew this right here, nothing is going to be covered. So we want to think about the purpose of our stitch. 1/8 of an inch from this folded edge, this pressed edge of our bias covering that seam. That is what is next. All right, so we've sewn our work. Now it's time to clip. We're gonna clip through both layers right here so we can get to the top of our work. Go close, but not through. So we clip through the binding layer and through our white, which would be our shirt. Now that we have clipped, we got close to those stitches. You can see that. We got very close to those stitches, but we didn't go through. So your clip is only about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little tiny bit longer. Now it's gonna be time to move on so we can do our edge stitch on the right side of our fabric. So we've clipped. Now we bring the bias to the right side of the fabric. That clipping allows you to bring it to the right side of the fabric so there's no puckering. And that's key. Take a look there. We don't have any puckers. Let me move this out of your way so you can see it. So we went around that top and came down. We only went across with a shortened stitch, maybe 2 stitches. Sometimes you can do it with 1, but we shortened the stitch length for that purpose. So we had our regular 2.5 stitch here, and then we shortened it just for those 2 stitches across the top. And then we made that pivot turn across the top with those 2 short stitches. And then we came back down, we put it back to our regular 2.5. So your stitches per inch are longer because they're 2.5 on your dial on the left and the right. Across the top, your stitches per inch are only at the 2, so it's a little tighter because that top area can easily rip and we don't want that. So now let's wrap the binding to cover that stitch and we are going to the machine to edge stitch this down. A 1/16 of an inch is really beautiful. So let's sew this at a 1/16 of an inch from the folded edge. Now remember, the goal here is to cover that stitch. So when we fold the remaining bias to cover the stitch, we want to sew right here at this folded edge so that the stitch is covered. It does not show. If you sewed a 1/16 of an inch from this folded edge, the whole thing is exposed, so you didn't really do anything. So make sure you understand that you want to cover that stitch and stitch at the folded edge. Here is on my left side as you're looking at this video, 1/16 of an inch away, all the way around and down. Now it's time to pin. So I have my pins. Cover that stitch, and we are focusing right here. We want to sew a 1/16 of an inch away from our folded edge. So that's very close to that folded edge. You can sew it 1/8 of an inch. It's just that the 1/16 of an inch looks better. But 1/8 is definitely an industry standard, so if that works best for you, do that. So I'm just pinning a few just to get started. I'm gonna continue. Remember, normally we pin the opposite way. So normally you pin perpendicular to your sewing line. In this case, I just want to do a few pins. They're not exactly perpendicular, just so that you can get a visual. I will repin at my machine. So right here, I've wrapped around. I just wanted to get a visual for you. So this is the right side of my fabric. I've marked it with this masking tape, and you can see you're covering that stitch and sewing it down. So now that you can see, let's go on ahead to the machine so we can sew it. The key here is at the top. You want to make sure you are covering that stitch right at the very top edge, but without getting any puckers. All right. Let's head to the machine. I'm gonna repin at the machine the proper way, going perpendicular to my sewing line. I just wanted to let you get a quick look. So I've already started pinning. The pins are gonna be perpendicular to the sewing line. You're covering that original first stitch just by a 1/16 of an inch. So I'll continue doing that. So you can see my stitch is exposed. Bring the bias just to cover it by a 1/16 of an inch. And you're pinning perpendicular to the sewing line. So we're sewing across this way and my pins are going there. Bring it to just cover a little more. 1/16 of an inch covered, add a pin. So you don't want to cover too far. A 1/16 of an inch is very, very small, so just be careful that you don't pull the binding too far. Just want to barely cover it. And that is so that, of course, on the back of your work, it's neat and it'll be very close to the ditch. So here, once again, barely covered by a 1/16 of an inch, add that pin. So this is the right side of my fabric. It is all pinned. Be sure that you can check and not see those stitches. So if you didn't pull it far enough, the stitches will show. So I'm looking all around and my stitches are covered just by a 1/16 of an inch. So the binding goes a 1/16 of an inch further than that stitch, so it's very close. So now I'm ready to sew. This would be the bottom edge of our sleeve. That would be the shoulder or the top edge of our sleeve, and this is our placket. So now to sew it, I'm gonna turn it upside down and put it in the machine. The left side here is where we start because the majority of the garment is on the left. The machine is on the right. So we place it in this way. Your zipper foot would be great for this, or you can use the left or the right cording foot. Those half feet, those cording feet are amazing because it just lets you see very closely. So I'm gonna use my left side for my zipper foot adjustment on this machine. The industrial machinery, you would use the narrow zipper foot, or you would use the left or right cording foot, which are also called half feet. Whichever one allows you to see where you want to sew, that's what we want to use. So here now I can see much, much better. I have adjusted my feet. I'm sinking my needle, and I'm gonna remove that first pin so I don't sew on top of it. And let's get started. Go really slowly and prepare to do this a second and a third and a fourth time even. Just the more you do it, the better, because this placket is really, really popular for a sleeve. And once you get it, you've got it. So again, I'm on the right side of my fabric. This is my masking tape telling me it's the right side. And then on the wrong side of my fabric, you can see we'll be stitching in that ditch. All right, let's get started. 2 stitches forward and then 2 stitches back. That is our traditional back stitch. Okay, let's get started. My needle's down, the presser foot is up. I can see where I am. I don't have any pins right in the way there. So I'm gonna go forward a couple stitches and then back to get that back stitch in place. My stitch per inch is either a 2 or a 2.5, whichever one your tech pack calls for. Back stitch. Okay, so there's our back stitch. It locks the stitch in place. I'm gonna go forward and start to remove some pins. Go very slowly, take your time, use your fingertips to control the pressure. And you can raise up and check to see how you're doing. Go slowly, check the pressure with your fingertips to keep everything anchored down, because once you take the pins out, then that fingertip pressure is all you have to secure everything. And every time I stop, I just turn the wheel to make sure the needle's down, so that when I start again, the thread does not come out of the eye of the needle. I'm just rotating around, making sure there are no puckers. So the folds are to the left of my work, but they are not sewn in. That repositioning is key every few stitches so that you just keep everything in place. So reposition, make sure everything's out of your way, make sure you can see, hold the fabric so that you can control where it's going. See here I stopped, but I am turning the wheel because when I stopped the needle was up. Make sure the needle's down every single time before you restart. And then my final bit of repositioning. There was my back stitch. Okay, lift, pull, and cut. And then if you miss something, you can go back in and redo it. So let's just say something got away from you. It's okay, go back, redo. Now, let's take a look at the work. I'm gonna trim my thread tails. I typically like to trim the top side or the right side of my work and then go back in something like this and trim the bottom thread instead of together, because when you do them together, sometimes you still have a short thread tail left that's about 1/8 of an inch long, and it's just harder to go back and cut that a second time. So let's look at what we've done. So we have a nice straight edge here, checking just to make sure there's no exposure of that stitch. That was our stitch number 1. So good, nothing is exposed, everything is sewn right at the edge, so we're okay. So we're in good shape. Now, this is a perfect time to press. Then we're gonna trim those, and we have one more stitch to do. Again, this is the right side of the fabric, and that edge stitch is showing at the right. There are no puckers when you went across. That's why we did that shortened stitch to go across here. No puckers. And then we went down the other side. So just keep that in mind. When we went across, that's what's allowing us to have that stability, those 2 stitches across. Shorten that stitch length, do those 2 stitches across when you start to attach, and then turn the stitch length back and finish that seam. But that allows you to have no puckers and to be secure. That's the key. The clipping is crucial. You have to clip close but not through so that everything will release. And now we go press, and we have one more stitch to do. So now let's press our work. This is my right side of the garment. I have my edge stitch showing. I'm just gonna move my tape out of the way so that I don't press it. You never wanna press your masking tape. So here I'm gonna start with just the garment itself. So this would be like a sleeve, for example, where the placket could go. So now that I've done that, now let's press just the tip of the iron over the stitches, and be careful not to press in unwanted wrinkles. So I'm just using the tip of the iron, a little bit at a time, then give it some steam. Just that point, that tip of the iron to start, and I'm doing a couple inches at a time. I'm gonna move that out of the way, straighten and smooth just with my finger, press. Make sure I'm not adding unwanted wrinkles, and give it a little steam. And let's do it for the other side as well. So we're just marrying the thread from our placket that we used to sew on our cone to the threads in our fabric. A little bit at a time, and again, you're using the pointed front tip of the iron. We don't want to add wrinkles and ruin the work with the iron because that can be done. After you set your iron on it for a little bit, then hit the steam. The next thing that we need to do is to actually sew. So we're going to put right sides together to sew a diagonal right at the very top of our placket. So right sides together. I'll put the tape back, make it easier, but you can also see the edge stitch. You can see that you don't see that edge stitch on the wrong side. So this is the right side of my garment. I'm gonna put right sides together. And now I'm going to sew diagonally right across the top edge of the work. Right across diagonally, just on the placket. Let's remove the towel and let's take a look. Right sides together. We are sewing right here diagonally only on the placket to keep it together, and it will be a miter, so it's a diagonal. And on the outside, when you go back to the right side of your fabric, you'll see a nice miter there. So I have my ruler here. I have my marking tool. Right sides of my fabric are together. And I am lining up these left and right sides of the bias. And our goal is to sew diagonally. We want a miter. It's a diagonal seam right here. So we're just gonna put our ruler in place using our water-soluble chalk mark. And we're gonna draw that in. And that's where we will sew. We're only gonna be drawing on the bias, and we are only sewing on the bias, not the garment. All right, so there's our diagonal miter. Use the ruler. I've used the marking tool. And now let's sew it. Back stitch, of course, at the beginning and end. So here's my fabric. Right sides are together. My masking tape is on the right side. And I can see my diagonal line. And that's gonna be my miter when I'm done sewing it. Okay, I've switched back to my regular presser foot. And now, this is the right side of my fabric, so right sides together. My masking tape was just to remind me where the right side was. Remember, broadcloth has no right or wrong side, so mark it with some tape so that way you don't have to worry about sewing the wrong sides together. I've drawn in my diagonal, which is the miter. I use the ruler, I use the marking tool. Now I'm just gonna sew right on top of it. Do not sew the garment. So I'm folding the garment right at the point at the top of our pivot point. I'm just folding it to get it out of the way. I'm only gonna sew on the binding, making sure the bindings are lined up, touching each other. I'll just toss a pin in just to hold that up and show. Has to be lined up right there, binding touching binding. Our sewing is only on the binding, one diagonal seam. I'm gonna remove that and let's sew it. We are not sewing on the garment, so I'm gonna fold that, get that out of the way. We are only sewing on the binding. Check to make sure it looks the way you want it to look. Sink your needle, lower your presser foot. Again, I went back to a regular presser foot for this. And 2 stitches forward, 2 stitches back. So you want to back stitch at the beginning and end. So here I'm going forward and back. And now my stitch length is at a 2.5. our regular connecting stitch. Finish the full length of that seam. Back stitch. When we look at the right side of our garment, we can see our miter. I'm gonna move this out of the way. This masking tape was reminding me of the right side. Now, I'm gonna continue and press on the right side of the placket. I'm touching that miter just a little bit, right at the top, and I'm touching the bias for that final press. And just make sure that you go back. Trim your extra length of binding and overlock everything for presentation purposes. Flip your work over and press the wrong side of the fabric as well, so that miter gets pressed to one side. You know how we do. Press, 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 press. Right side, wrong side, threads, everything. And there we have our continuous placket. You should celebrate because you did it. This was really a big one. You totally did it. You did your thing. All right, until next time, happy sewing. And don't forget, trim and overlock.